Hello, everybody. I'm happy to see you here today, and thanks for coming to my presentation. As I can see, there are a few issues with your headphones. I'm still waiting for a couple seconds. Maybe you can give me a thumbs up if it works. Does it work? So I'm going to start now. We want to talk about visualization and emotionalization. I want to get more creativity and share some impulses on how you can spice up your everyday life and your business life and be more creative. On the right-hand slide, you see a slide. You might see someone you know on the slide. Those of you who know Disney might know the white rabbit of Alice through the looking glass, and we are on the traces of Alice today, to be more specific, and we're going to follow the traces of our white rabbit. So this white rabbit is going to guide us through this trip today, and I'm going to invite you to dream a little bit in our creative world and to become more creative in the future. So the looking glass here, the first question I have, who knows Alice through the looking glass? Actually, everyone. And who knows the second part? Yes, I already thought that too. A few less than I had expected. And it's just a recommendation. Please take a look at it, watch it. It's really recommendable. And it's also part of the second part as well. Today we're going to be talking about the second part. I want to bring you to this world and the world behind the looking glass. And the mirror metaphor is also going to play a big role today. As in the second part of Alice, we're going to sit down with Mr. Time in the chronosphere. They're going to carry us through room and space and time, and we're going to sit down and have a tea party with the crazy hat maker. And I'm just going to invite you, listen to the person who is sitting there. It's Mr. Time, and for those of you who don't know him, well, Alice is trying to find the family of the crazy hat maker, and she needs time for that. And I'm going to start with the video.
Heilst du eigentlich wirklich alle Wunden?
Ich sitze hier und schinde Zeit.
Und wie kommt es, dass man dir hinterherhinkt?
Ich finde einfach nicht die Zeit. Grinse, wo warst du? Du bist zu spät.
Ich gebe zu, ich spiele gerade auf Zeit. Ich nehme mir jetzt mal Zeit.
Glaubt, ihr närrischen Einfallspinsel. Wirklich, ich hätte diese albernen Witzeleien nie zuvor gehört. Eure Spottversuche verpuffen im Nichts.
Seht nur, die Zeit verfliegt.
Es reicht! Schluss mit dem Verschwenden von mir.
Habe ich den Nerv der Zeit getroffen?
So, you might have heard one or the other metaphor, everything in the context of time. So that's Mr. Time here. And so this is visualized. The time that we usually can't see is depicted here. And everything plays in this context of time. A grinning cat, you can see it as well. Sitting on the shoulders of Mr. Time, the Cheshire cat. And they're playing for time. That's an ambiguity, of course, because it's basically sitting on the shoulders, but it's definitely playing with time, and because it wants to gain some time so that Alice has more an edge over the others. Okay, time flies, and that's why I would like to move on to metaphors and analogies. So what is a metaphor? The word metaphor is a Greek word, and it's composed of take something and transfer it somewhere else. So the meaning is transferred, the meaning of something is transferred to something else. So we're basically playing with metaphors. I brought you another example. In German, there's a saying referring to clouds. In English, for example, we have one's head in the cloud, which means daydreaming. And if you just imagine you have a cloud and you have your head in the cloud, then you are not in the reality, you're daydreaming. And so it's difficult to explain some metaphors because the content is too complex or depending on the target group. And sometimes you can use these metaphors to simplify things, to make them easier to understand and address your target group even better. Analogies, on the other hand, they similes basically. So you look at an example, for example, fleas, and you all know fleas can be extremely annoying. Then you have a negative association with fleas, and then you say, but it's also difficult to get rid of negative habits. So we can't really directly imagine the negative bad habits, but you can stay in the same image and thinking of fleas or lice on people's heads, and you have an idea. So an analogy is a similarity, basically, a resemblance between specific concepts. And why are metaphors so present in Alice, and why should we use them? Very important, I just told you, we can easily illustrate complex content. So if you're listening to specialist talks, and you're not the experts, but if there's a specific metaphor or simile that is used, then it makes it much easier to understand the contents. But oftentimes words are not that easy to grasp. So we are transferring words into images, and it's much easier to deal with images because we can remember the images rather than the words. They stay in your mind, and you can remember this image even long after it's passed. And you see the first metaphor. Of course, we have target-specific communication. We always have to think about who's actually sitting there, who's listening to us. If we're giving a pitch or we want to hold a presentation, then at the beginning we think of who's going to be the fish for whom we want to bait the hook for, so that it suits the fish, because you need to bait the hook to suit the fish and not the fisherman. And maybe you can play around with these metaphors in your everyday life. And if someone doesn't understand something right away, how can you transfer the meaning in a creative way? And that's why metaphors are also so strong in their impact. If you think of the psychology behind it and about the cognitive processing of these metaphors, well, our existing knowledge and the experience we gained in our everyday lives from our past, we basically create connections to these findings and to these experiences, and we can categorize it much better and identify it much easier and group it in specific ideas. What's also nice, we all know this saying, our mind loves stories. That's true because it's so much easier that you have a long-term memory for if once you have a visualized idea, not just words but concepts, because images stick in your mind much longer, and we don't need just tell the stories but the images, the pictures behind the stories. And now a second clip from the movie. How, and I already told you about the mirror metaphor. So how can we use these metaphors to anchor our contents in the long run? And especially at the beginning of this clip, just watch who's animating Alice to go through the looking glass into a new world of metaphors.
Absolem. Eigenartig.
Abgeschlossen. Da ist jemand drin. Wer ist da drin? Wer ist da drin? Das Betreten dieses Raumes ist verboten. Holt mal
So Alex is basically diving into the mirror. She's entering this mirror world with all her senses, with her body, and she's emerged in this world. It's the same room, just a little bit different. It's mirrored, and she comes out much smaller. And when you move on, you see chess figures moving around. So things that are actually not vivid, they become living objects. You might remember the first part. Maybe a butterfly is talking to her. All of a sudden, we saw our famous Absalom, and we're going to talk about him later. Absalom can be compared to the white rabbit in the first part. He's inviting her to enter the mirror world. And from this, if you go from the systemic talks, we can think about having a change in perspectives. Either we say we know the phrase that I'm going to show you the mirror, or it can be your mirror. That's a metaphor that you invite your the person opposite you to speak to you and to work with metaphors. And also with this mirror world, you can achieve much more. Just to give you more content, Alice has to face many challenges in reality. Her dad died, and for 3 years she was on a sailing boat and had to tackle and face challenges as a woman, which was very difficult at a time where men were prevalent. And she always has to face these challenges. And the ship of her that father has been sold, and the house there's a mortgage on the house, and so she comes back from her travels and she doesn't have a good relationship to her mom because everything is really depressing her. And then there's many other challenges in reality, and you might know this. Sometimes you have lots of things, either because there's a challenge of a project and we keep talking, but we can't really move a step ahead. And that's what this mirror metaphor is really nice for. If you invite your customer or project members to become more creative in the sense of we're going to enter the world of metaphors today. And it's no longer Mr. Meyer and Ms. Müller we're talking about with different hierarchies that we have to take care of. But it's definitely the chicken or the sheep that we're talking about. So we're becoming so abstract. And the benefit is that we can keep a distance to reality. We can speak more openly and much freer. And we can remain in this world of metaphors. And we can create a really colorful world where we can get really absurd ideas how we can solve specific things and find a super solution in this world. So Alice, as I said, is on her way to find the parents of the Mad Hatter, and this love that the Mad Hatter has for his family and his dedication to finding this family. Alice is also doing everything that she can to support him, and Mr. Time as well. There's a really nice scene in the movie where he says, "Who's the fallen soldier in your pocket?" And he's talking about a specific watch that has stopped running because it's the watch from her dead father. And Mr. Time tells her we're going to throw everything away at some point in time. And she takes these examples from the world of metaphors because she resolved the problems there, and she's taken them onto reality, not her own problems, but those of the Mad Hatter, takes them into reality. And with these ideas and approaches, she can also search for ideas and solutions in reality and can try to find synergies. So we can be very creative and get a distance to reality, to everyday life, by inviting ourselves to enter such a world of metaphors. And now the what is still missing. And here I would like to ask you, what do we do when we use metaphors? Really bluntly, we spice up our presentations, our workshops, our communication, our meetings. We can, I told you that if you have specialist talks, if we rewind and say, with vitamin C, there's so much energy running through our veins. A bolt of energy is coursing through your veins. And if a professor is standing in front of me and wants to explain it to me in medical terms, then I might get lost. So you have to think about who's sitting here. Am I talking to professors, or am I talking to laymen or to students who are just interested in the subject? Maybe they want to apply for medical studies. It's easy to visualize everything. And what's also really nice for the what, why don't you actively invite everyone around you to enter this world, open the door to this world and look around and see how you can implement all of that in your projects. And just to wind up, and what use is all this creative inventory and all these metaphors? You can explain complex things quite easily. You can be more creative. At the beginning of a project start, it's 40 people in one room with different ideas in their heads. We might not all understand the technical background. We have to work cross-functionally across these teams. How can you design such a kickoff? By using metaphors and becoming more creative, and by explaining a process that's not that easy to understand for everyone who's in the room. Of course, a comment, you shouldn't use 20 metaphors every 5 minutes. That would confuse people and overload. So use these metaphors scarcely and use them where it makes sense. If you're thinking about the Cheshire cat, that context was funny because it was actually sitting on time, but metaphorically speaking, he just tried to slow down time. And it's always good to take one step back and look at everything with some distance. That's why I would like to invite you to take a step back, become more abstract, or look at things in a more abstract way and reconsider things. Look to your right, to your left, and maybe an animal world will help you. And so a quick invitation from me so you can remember this better. I have our friend Absalom with us. And just a reminder for you, Absalom is our doorkeeper to the brain. The caterpillar could be the limbic system. So we have to convince the caterpillar to like our stories so that the caterpillar actually lets it through to our brain. And the caterpillar invited Alice to dive into the world of metaphors. And just a quick reminder for you, the caterpillar, Absalom, maybe you can find a butterfly, or you have someone and you find a caterpillar in the spring, then just think of Absalom so that you become more creative. And if you convince him, then you can definitely convince others too. So your contents will stay in your audience's minds for longer. And of course, I like to end on a metaphor as well, maybe even two. I thought about, let's paint the town red tonight and have a blast. So that's why I would like to ask you now, what side of the mirror are you sitting on the side of reality or on the side of the metaphor world? Thanks for being here and listening.